Our next speaker today is Mr. Richard Gelpke, who's standing to my left here. Dick has had quite an interesting career. Dick's grandfather bought land at Lake Boon in around 1908, and some of that land has been in the family ever since. Dick summered at the lake when he was young, but went to school in the so-called burbs. He and his wife Linda have lived at Lake Boon since the early 60s. Dick has taught at Algonquin Regional High School, again the mid-60s, then at Boston State College, later the same decade. He's also taught at UMass Boston, that was the early 80s, until 2004, when he retired from the Department of Geography and Earth Science, where he concentrated on historical and environmental issues and physical geography. He has served on many boards in Hudson and the state. An interesting aspect about Lake Boon when Dick's been living there, he's been a long-time summer resident. As a child also, his family cottage once had a Stow address until the town boundaries were reconfigured, and is now in Hudson. So without even moving, he changed addresses. I think that's kind of cool.
Without having to move.
Dick, welcome.
Well, thank you. Thank you. Anybody here from Lake Boon? Yay! Oh, damn, I was hoping to lie. Oh, crap, I guess I'll have to. Well, thank you for coming on such a beautiful day. But my school didn't look like this. Sort of wish it had almost, but nevertheless. Lake Boon. Just a bit about the physical background of the lake. By the way, this is the map. I live here. A little bit about the geology, the physical background. I'm sure many of you, even if you haven't had a geology background, have heard of kettle holes. When the glacier came, block of ice, as the glacier was retreating, broke off, took a while to melt, sand piling around it from the glacier, and voila, we have a depression in the ground which fills up with water. And that's what happened. That's what we had at the end of the glacier. What is now the first basin. Some of you know about that. It's where the dam is, Hanson's Beach off Sudbury Road. But that was the extent of the lake for 10,000 years, or a very long period of time. And probably about as much as we need to say about the physical background, but emptying into that basin I should add, let's see, upside down here, I don't do well upside down. Here's the Assabet River over here, and this lake, or what is first basin, empty. There was no dam at that point, no man-made dam, but there had to be a bit of a natural dam, otherwise there wouldn't have been a lake. So there was a low spot as you're coming down and crossing the dam. There was a slight rise that would have kept water in this first basin. But draining up through what is now the second basin on the Hudson side, and actually on the Stow, was a brook. Where is the crook? Where is your ram's horn? Oh, he took it away. Okay, called? Yeah, great. They called it Ram's Horn Brook. Don't ask me why. Somebody thought it looked like a ram's horn. Well, they have very fertile imaginations in those days. Must be they didn't have a whole lot to do at night. They didn't spend time on Facebook, so they dreamt up crazy names for places. But nevertheless, that's really sort of enough of the physical background. The first date that really appears as far as the lake area was in 1674. I'm never very good on dates. I was in geography, not history. We do maps, not dates. a man by the name of Matthew Boon with a friend, and I think his name was Kettle, settled somewhere up here, at least Boon did, somewhere where the outlet of the dam is.
Kettle house is right over here
Right over here?
on Maple Street.
Aha. That must be Stow. Doesn't mean anything to me. Stow. But at any rate, let's see. Matthew Boone was here, 1670s. Indians afoot. They come, beat him up, and according to the story, he struggles his way back towards Sudbury. Some people from Sudbury come, try to help him out. He doesn't make it, and winds up in a pool of blood in a pond, probably a vernal pool somewhere off Sudbury Road. But at any rate, so that's Matthew Boone. Hence we get Lake Boone. With or without a knee, I don't know. It's been a big raging argument that amounts to nothing. But then, probably the next thing that really begins to happen here, this is all farmed land down in through here, around the lake. And God knows what they were farmed. It was strictly meadow at that time, probably low, marshy, swampy stuff, maybe pasture. But all owned by various people. And in the mid-1840s, Amory Maynard, a name you'll probably be familiar with, comes along and he decides to buy all of the land around this area so that he can build a dam here in 1840 something, push the dam higher than the natural one, back up all of this. So he buys the land, and thank God somebody, talk about a researcher, went back, and we now have a map that lists all of the properties, book and page, and boundaries of who owned what. The 1840s, 1844 to 5, 6, in through there. And I've been in the Cambridge Registry, and that's when they were writing this kind of stuff. Anybody worked in the Cambridge Registry? Don't. Because it hasn't progressed much beyond the 1840s. It's just a dreadful place to work. In any event, so he bought up all that land, essentially to get the flowage rights. So he builds the dam in the 1840s. The lake backs up from this, what was only the first basin, backs all the way up into here. Some of this on the far end is very shallow, as you know if you've been there. And you can see some of the stumps that were cut, presumably chestnut stumps, because they're still there. You can still see these things. They look like a big octopus still in the water. And that would have been, I don't know, a couple hundred years ago, something like that. Some of those are still very, very hard wood. So why does Maynard do this? What is he backing this up for?
Mill.
Yeah, where?
Mill.
Yeah, where?
Maynard.
In Maynard, to do what?
Water power.
Water power for textiles, the woolen mill. And let's see, this is through the 1850s, just as a sidelight. The Cochituate Water Board, smacks of Boston, comes out and buys the water rights from Amory Maynard for here. What the hell does this have to do with Boston? We're not even on the right river. Assabet flows north, joins the Sudbury to form the Concord at
the bridge.
at that Concord, and then flows north to Lowell. So the question is, what does Boston want with this? This is what they called a compensating reservoir, because the Cochituate Water Board came out and scooped what was called Long Pond in those days, the Long Ponds, now Cochituate Reservoir in Framingham, Route 9, you know that area? When they backed that up, the water that would have gone down the Sudbury north to power the mills was diverted to Boston. Oh, geez, so avoid lawsuits, they bought this as what they called a compensating reservoir. So it's a little vague, but nevertheless, they did that. They held it for about 1848 to the mid-50s, then sold it back to him, probably at a loss. I mean, typical government agencies are not going to make money on this kind of stuff. So that brings us up to something like the Civil War. And demand for wool during the Civil War, oh, incredible. So the mills did extremely well. There was a financial panic before, there was one afterwards, and so forth, but they did very well. And then, so the woolen company continues to exist for the latter part of the 1800s. It does pretty well, it doesn't do well, and so forth. And the connection with, and this is the last we'll say about the mills, the connection with the, what is now Clock Tower Place in Maynard, the only connection is apparently up through the 1930s, as far as I can see, they would regularly still pull the boards in the lake to put water in the river. And I'm thinking, well, geez, they had electricity. I mean, I can need it for water power. It wasn't for water power, it was to wash the wool. So they would pull the boards here and also on the next reservoir upstream on the Assabet, which is, you're not Hudson people, so you don't care. Not even Marlboro people, so you care less. Fort Meadow. I think there were like 7 impoundments on the Assabet above Ben Smith Dam, which is what creates the water that goes into the mill. And they would pull the boards and then they would keep doing this. So the lake went up and down well within people's memories, significantly so, at least probably 3 or 4 feet. And it's relatively shallow anyway. So if you pull the dam 3 or 4 feet, you're going to get one hell of a shoreline all of a sudden exposed, and people, you know, this kind of thing. So, late 1800s, we have a really nice lake, and then it begins to get discovered. And it gets discovered by people mostly from Boston and west of and north of Boston. I've looked at a lot of the background, and nobody comes from Quincy, Braintree, or that area. They're either from the city, South Boston, Somerville, Revere, that area. And they come out and they form clubs, and usually men's clubs. I don't know where the girls were, but men's clubs in those days. They built a bunch of cabins around the lake, and they were seasonal for the most part. So by the very early 1900s, there were an awful lot of cabins around the lake, some houses. And one of the earlier settlers was James Parker. He actually bought land during the Civil War in the 1860s. Essentially the area, let's see, upside down again, off Sudbury Road. What is this? Oh, watershed boundary. Forget the watersheds. Along Sudbury Road, and this large area in through here. And this becomes the Parker land. And ultimately, the Parkers are the ones who run Larkin Lumber in Hudson, which just very recently went away. Really, really too bad. But nevertheless, the Parkers were here, and a number of others, but apparently this North Shore, what is now North Shore Drive, was not developed too early by a group. But there were several other groups that came and developed a good part of the lake. Up in this northeast part, along Barton Road, Uncle Jerome, so-called, and he appears up on Boon Hill, the drumlin up here in this kind of, what you call it, there, between Barton Road and along Pine Point. So Barton has a whole series of cabins along through here, the Barton family, along with the Eastmans. Along the South Shore, this area in here, which turns out to be the premier address of Lake Boon, where I come from, right over here. This was settled by the Lakeside Land Company, a group from Marlboro. John Rock, if you know that area at all, Rock Ave comes from that. It's not because there are stones. This is all glacial outwash. It's very flat. Boone's Plain and so forth. Very few rocks. So they do, and I have a really nice plan in 1909. No, I think it was 1903. They submitted a plan. Over in this area, Oakmore, which is near where, trying to think, along, let's see, Lower Main Street, West Ave, Lake Boone Ave, across from Comcast, or one of those places used to be in there. At any rate, on that side. And they developed in through here. This becomes important because, as we see later on, this tributary, which actually now comes from the golf course. What do they call? I'm not a golfer. There's a big golf course right in here, very successful. In through here, this turns out to be where the action of all of Lake Boone happens, much later on. Well, not actually much later on, beginning in the 1920s. There is a dance hall that begins in the early 1920s, a big dance hall. It was very popular. There are a number of small stores that happen along through here, restaurants. There was a barber shop. Anybody remember Toohey's Pharmacy in Hudson, where the Arthur Redding has a Hudson appliance right now, right on that corner? The bar lunch? Aha, you remember the bar lunch. Okay. Toohey's Pharmacy actually had a waterside pharmacy you could go up to in a boat. We have a picture of that. It was on Lakeside, so it was on the, let's see, on that side. Oh, here we are, on this side. And there were all kinds of things. And this really is where the action developed around here. It was really where the only, except one other, commercial activity on the lake occurred. The other place that you may have heard of, because it was in Stow, this town, was right up here at the very northern end of the lake, and it became Hanson's Beach. And Phil Hanson ran a beach there, and for many years, at least when I was a kid, that's where all the Labor Day races were typically held, right up and through there. So, let's see. By the 1920s, there was an awful lot of development on here. Now, how in the world did people get here? Well, let's see. Does that show? Yeah, that shows. Okay. Yep, the two railroads show. There were two railroads that came out, and that's probably what either saved or whatever, Lake Boone. Because the two railroads, the very first one is this one that comes down here, and this is the Marlboro branch of the Fitchburg Railroad of the B&M. And that came ungodly early. That came in like 1850. 1850, I mean, that was pretty damn early. 1851, Thoreau took a hike from Walden Pond over to Lake Boone a year after that. He could have taken the train, but he didn't. So you could come out here, and there was a station here at Boone Road, right where the Sudbury Road crosses the Assabet River, where Track Road is now. And that was, in the early days, Whitman Station, because of the Whitman farm just beyond it. So that was one. And the other was, let's see, over here. This is the so-called Central Mass Line along the southern edge of the lake. And the Central Mass Line was a fascinating railroad. It went from Waltham out through here, through Clinton, and went ultimately to Northampton. I mean, it was an incredible line. And there was a station, didn't do it all well upside down. There was a station, let's see, over here on Ordway Crossing. Some people think that station should have been on Main Street. And if you think about it, it really should have been on Main Street. Why it wasn't on Main Street was very simple. Ordway paid to have him have the stop so that he could take people to the lake. So when you get off here, actually when you get off at this one, you probably took a barge, which was a horse-drawn cart in the early days to get to the lake, or you could walk. Up here, it was a short walk up over the hill, the backside of the drumlin, down to here, which was Rooney's Beach later on, now the Perishow family. And in the early days, there was a store there, Bolam's General Store. And I don't even think you remember that one. That has been gone a long time.
Whether to be insulted
Actually, my dear, I wasn't even looking at you. I was looking over your head.
or, see, you got to be a little more careful.
Oh, boy. Dueling. Okay, so once you got to the lake, then what? Well, in the early 1900s, they had a number of ferries that you could take. They had several stops. One up here. Actually, as you go Sudbury Road and you see the lake, let's see, right after Pine Point, I'm sort of familiar with that. It's almost on the lake. The lake is right there. And there was a stop there. You could get out, you could take the ferry. And they would stop at various scheduled stops, or I suppose if you stood on the shore and said, me, they would stop and pick you up. There was a second landing, so-called Cove Landing stop, over here at what ultimately came, as most people who know anything about Lake Boon would remember, Monahan's, which was a bar and associated activities that went on that I've heard tell from my elders that I wouldn't know anything about. And that was right here. And there were a number of other stops around. And that went on for, well, until the era when you could drive a lot better. So by the 30s, they certainly were long gone by the 30s. It was probably in the teens and the 20s that you could still do the barge around. And the dance hall, which I mentioned, that was started in 1922, thereabouts, did a lot of dancing. And during the wartime, during the 30s, this area, this so-called Cove Landing area, right in through here, that was developed early, where the Monahans is, where a whole bunch of other stores were located, began to acquire a seedy reputation. Monahan's was a bar, and there was the dance hall had turned into a skating rink at some point, although I think it was still a dance hall then. I mean, there wasn't any date by which it went from one to the other, but it became a very famous skating rink a little bit later. The police are assigned from here. There is a lot of articles in the Hudson newspaper about policing the lake. I don't think Stow did much to it, but Hudson did. So that was during the 30s, and up comes World War II. And by that time, the skating rink really, in this area, this Cove Landing area, with some happenings here at Hanson's Beach, becomes kind of a happening place. Yes, sir?
Where's the border between Stow and Hudson?
Well, it's funny you should ask. The border between Hudson and Stow, used to be like that. Okay, there was a straight line across the lake because it was established long before the lake was backed up and that it became a second basin. But when,
That was the longitude.
well, not quite, it's an angle. Yeah, it's not quite east-west. But what it does is it nips off a little piece here, which is on the Stow side, but it's Hudson. And it crossed over here and left this stuff over here in Stow, but it was serviced by Hudson. And it ran through my front yard, so when we realigned the lake in '79 to run down the middle of the lake, to make all Stow side Stow and Hudson side Hudson, then it got around that problem. But when I was a kid, all of this, even though it was technically Stow, we were all oriented Hudson. Went to Hudson schools and all that sort of stuff. I'm a little vague what happened over here on this side. Oh, I should happen. There was a very famous picnic grounds on this nipped off piece right here that was technically in Hudson, but on the Stow side. And there was a dance pavilion there run by a Mr. Benjamin Lovett, a name that doesn't really mean a whole lot these days, but Benjamin Lovett was a dance instructor. He had a studio in Hudson, and this was 1910, that period of time. And when Henry Ford came to Sudbury and started fooling around with the Wayside Inn, Henry Ford was a great promoter of especially square dancing. He got his hands on Lovett and made him a national craze. And he went to Dearborn and taught all over the country. Became a very big deal. Started right here in our own little thing. And all kinds of people sort of emanate out of this. So after World War II, up through the 50s, which was probably the heyday of roller skating, the rink became a very famous rink and had, don't go away, I can pass these around. Tonight, let's roller skate. Lake Boon Rink opens 1951. This was an ad from the paper, and I can pass it around. Let's see. Skating Club, this is 1950. The Lake Boon Roller Skating Club went to Nahant Beach. 75 members of the club went. And there were a lot more who didn't go. I mean, there was just a large, large number. Leonard O'Connell of Barton Road, Lake Boon, are active members of the Magic Wheels Skating Club. And these people skated nationally back in the 50s. It was a very big deal, and it was a club known all over the place. Skip skated at the rink, he said. I roller skated. Did you really? I skated at the roller rink. I don't remember you.
Must have quite a long time ago.
Oh, okay. They let you in? You were from Stow. They let you in even though you were from Stow? Sorry. Definitely, I'm talking to him now. Well, we let them in. Actually, they came from Boston. They came from all over, and it was a big rink. Started out as a dance hall. It's more of kind of a fading memory now kind of thing. All gone. And in early, mid-'70s, I think by '74, it essentially was a wreck and ultimately torn down, as was Monahan's next door. And Breeze Inn, which was a small restaurant just up the street on Worcester Ave, run by Pappas, Greek, who also cooked up in Hudson, and known all over the place. There were a number of other clubs I should mention. There was the Lake Boon Catholic Association, and they did, oh my God, they did all kinds of things in addition to Sunday morning at the Association Hall. They actually had a building off of Barton Road. And this is talking about a music event they had, largely attended, but see if you find a pattern here. President William Hickey, Vice President Clark, O'Connell, Leary, Hannon, Casey, Coyle, O'Donnell, Hickey, Hannon, Kelly. You know, this damn French, they get in everywhere. So it was indeed a really big deal. Actually, my grandfather in 1920, 21, when they formed that association, he was on the original, and they were all people from Boston who put that together. Through the 50s and the 50s was really the heyday of that skating in that era. And as I look around, some of you probably way too young to remember, but the 60s, the world changed. And it changed at Lake Boon, and it changed everywhere through a variety of reasons that you probably all remember. And that's when things went away. It's also the area that I went off to summer camps. I was a camp counselor for years, so I actually didn't spend all that much time as a kid at the lake. I was elsewhere. And in the 70s, what really began to happen, starting in the 60s, was what's called eutrophication of the lake. And that has to do with the growth of weeds, which are really direct response to fertilizer, as in septics, because of course in the early days, little houses on tinier plots of land, and they probably had a 55-gallon oil drum up towards the street, and then they took water either directly out of the lake or a shallow well pump 5-10 feet down. Jesus, I don't know, I put enough of the damn things down. I mean, just put it in, pump, pitcher pump, you're in business and you got water. I think, Lou, yours is not very far from the lake, is it? Nope. And not very deep either. And my guess is they're probably still a number. Now, on the Hudson side, we've had water for probably, I don't know, 20 years or something like that. But on the Stow side, oh, that's right, Stow. This is the town where you pay moderate taxes and get so much in return.
Hey, don't go
Yeah,
there.
sorry about that. I should have, just to finish off, I should have mentioned this. 1950, thousands participated in 3-day holiday program held at Lake Boon. The big event of the season were the Labor Day races. And this is from September 7th, which was just after Labor Day. Thousands of thrilled spectators witnessed the Labor Day weekend events, one of the best programs ever staged at the lake. The 3-day activities included field events Saturday afternoon, a costume ball for roller skaters Saturday night, motorboat parade Sunday afternoon, pop concert and dance Sunday night, water and canoe races Monday morning. At noontime, what did people do in the 50s and up through this period of time? They went home and they gathered everything up they were going to take back and left to go back home. Very few people in those days lived at the lake year-round. And even in the 60s, I can remember very well walking down at night to the lake and looking around, and there were just 2 or 3, and I'm on the second basin, just 2 or 3 lights on. That meant that people were there. All the others were seasonal cottages. And people went back to the Welsleys and the Belmonts and the Somervilles and Boston and so forth. And the lake emptied out on Monday afternoon, literally that day. And that was sort of in the 60s. In the 70s, I'd go down and there'd be a few more lights on. And then in the 80s, there were an awful lot more. And by that time, the notion of having a country cottage in at the lake and a townhouse were gone. So people moved to the lake or sold it, whichever. And then slowly in the 80s and the 90s, we had further developments because, cripes, as early as the 20s, much of the good waterfront land had already been developed, either by sizable houses or tiny little things around the Cove Landing. I mean, think of 5,000 square foot lots. It's just a tiny little lot. And there were all kinds of issues of upgrading. We've had many efforts, grants to try to clean up the lake. And actually now it's in pretty decent shape, but through a lot of effort. And we've had a lot of studies. One of the issues that came up, however, which was really interesting, is Lake Boon is a great pond, which means, according to state definition, it's over 10 acres. And it was over 10 acres in its natural state, because the first basin was about 70 to begin with, so there was no question. in order to get any state money as a great pond, you have to have public access. Ooh, now where's the public access going to be? Well, that was always a good challenge. Stow rightly said, well, you're not going to park on the dam and establish a beach there. That's a no-no. And so where are you going to do it? Well, Hanson's Beach, but that went away and it became Bob Rooney's place, and that was sort of a club. So we found a place on the very far end of the lake. What did they do with it? Down here in what is called the Stumps, and it's just what it sounds like, way down here. And if you go up and down Sudbury Road on a decent day, you know exactly where it is because it's where all the cars are parked. And the water at that end is 1 or 2 feet deep. Very pretty down there. Actually, that was Bob Dawes' land in the old days, and he donated that for public access. And lots, very shallow, so people go in there, but there's really no parking. The state forest is, the Assabet Wildlife Refuge is across the street. There's a little bit of parking there, not much. So, I don't know. That's Lake Boon.
Dick, thank you very much.
You're welcome.
Very enlightening. Any final comments you want to make? Any final comments you want to make? Or we're all- What's that?
I didn't want to make this a public question, but was there any discussion? I heard that there's one lady who developed brain cancer because of the water in her